And hi, everybody, and welcome back to Random Chats with Dade and Jude. I'm Dade.
And I'm Jude.
It's good if you respond. Otherwise, that little intro doesn't work. But welcome back to our podcast, where we're going to talk randomly about random things today. And the random thing today is perfectionism, Jude. Perfectionism.
Perfectionism. Da.
I don't know whether I want to go down this path, but we're going to see how we go, because I think this would be quite revealing, and see how we go. How does the word? How do you see it, just to begin with? Like, how do you, when you hear that word?
I think that it's one of those words that creeps up on you and kind of envelopes you without you actually realizing what's actually happening until you're too far in it, and then you've kind of got a benchmark to constantly feel that you have to deliver against. And sometimes that can be really challenging.
Yeah, it's good, and it's interesting as well that when I hear it, I think about other people, but I don't think about myself. But as we mostly explore this, it's more, yeah, I am a recovering perfectionist, I like to call it now.
Yeah.
So what I thought I'd do in this podcast, Jude, just to randomize how we do some of this. I've got some definitions of perfectionism or perfectionists, or what it actually means. So I just thought I'd read one, and then we'll just talk about it and see how we go.
Yeah, do. That's great. Let's go. I like it.
Let's go. All right. So perfectionism in psychology is a broad personality trait characterized by a person's concern with striving for flawlessness and perfectionism, and is accompanied by critical self-evaluations and concerns regarding others' evaluations.
Deep. Let's unpack that.
I know, but then when you start to unpack it, you're like, yeah, it's critical self-evaluations. Like, I do that, especially when the others are kind of like, oh God, like, are they judging me? Or that, and when you're in different scenarios, you do feel that sometimes.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, actually, that is like a really kind of like in-depth kind of characteristic, isn't it, as well? It's like sometimes I've always looked at people, because I am very much like that myself. Like, I'm a critical thinker and I evaluate everything. But sometimes when I see people that just seem to have like no cares in the world, you think, God, how freeing. It must be nice for them. They've obviously got things that they've got going on, or standards or whatever, but they just don't let it affect them as deeply as others. Like I think you and I maybe.
And look, well, that's the thing. We just don't know. I think that's just our observation of them.
Right. But they just seem happier, lighter, because they,
Yeah. Well, yeah. And look, maybe to others that we look light and happier, but they just don't know that we have to. Maybe it's just the thing that you put out there. You just never know. I thought
that's quite true, actually.
And I feel it was interesting over striving for flawlessness and perfection. And it's like, yeah, to the outside world, you kind of have to show a certain personality, like to look to the outside world one way. But inside, you know that thing of the duck that's gliding along, and it's like underneath, it's like this.
I know exactly what you mean.
That's how I kind of see how we unpack this.
And it's also interesting because I wonder whether in times gone by, if that was a what's the word I'm looking for? If that was like an actual feeling or an experience that people who had simpler lives a long time ago, I'm talking about, whether that was a thing, or is this something that's evolved as we've become more in need of making more time for more things and being more available to more people and juggling lots of balls? Like, I wonder whether life, when it was simpler, whether these things actually existed, or is it something that's evolved?
Oh, good question, Jude. Let me neutral on that for a second. Where my mind went instantly was, yes, it was must be a long time ago, but because of news and how people were put up and then compared to each other, like when like people started to like talk about like this person's better than this person's like got more money than this person, and that's like the separations of different kind of like in our society, and then we got compared to each other. Maybe that was when it started. Because you had like, well, I don't feel like that person. How do I do? How do I look like that person? How do I be like that person? How do I strive to be that perfectionism?
Do you know, all I'm thinking right now is two words. Do you know what those two words are?
It's not my name.
Social media.
Oh yeah, social media.
Social media. The introduction of social media, I think, has completely created the beast that you just explained. to a point.
I agree. It's amplified it. I would say it's always been there. Like I know there's family members who would also say, oh, we have a similar family, like a trait, because like you learn it and you kind of thing. So I would say it's also generational passed down. But I don't think, like, if we go back hundreds of years, maybe most wouldn't be worried then. But I do think in the last 100 years, it's actually mostly evolved in that kind of way for sure.
Because I think the old version of perfectionism, even a generation ago, might have actually been how you are perceived by others. So therefore, you know, you want to be seen to be doing a good job, maybe not being perfect at your job, but the fear of potentially being, what's the word I'm looking for right here? I'm losing my words tonight. Not compared, but the fear of being judged. It's like a judgment almost. I think that could have been like the version of perfectionism before perfectionism as we know it, perhaps, like, you know, to be seen to be doing everything as you can.
Yeah. Oh, look, and I 100%, like you would do, like, especially when, like, in society, that some people are like, they look down on others or they look compared, and it's like, it's that you try and do everything just for self-preservation. And sadly, it's only now that we're having these conversations that are focused on yourself and like screw what everybody else is thinking, and think about you first, not what you should, what be portrayed in the media, or you should be portrayed in a certain way.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's a very new way of thinking, isn't it? People.
Go on, sorry.
Go on.
But the media
I was going to say
a massive part.
I think there's a time delay today. Anyway, carry on. Where were we?
Conversation. So I'll go on to the next one. You ready?
Yes, and go.
Perfectionism is a self-destructive and addictive belief system that fuels this primary thought. If I look perfect and do everything perfectly, I can avoid or minimize the painful feelings of shame, judgment, and blame.
Oh, that's a really meaty big one, isn't it? Right there.
My friend Brené Brown. Like,
yes.
I can see how, like, it's a belief system because you're having that narrative in your head constantly. And that is that external view again that we were speaking about, over looking perfect outside, those kind of things, because you don't want that judgment or that blame or shame. And shame's a word I've explored over the last year myself, and it's like it's not a nice thing to do, so you do everything to kind of do that, but also shame silence you as well. And
it's like this expectation that we either individually put upon ourselves, or that we feel that that person next to us is having an expectation of us that they're not even having the expectation of. Like, we've somehow created this narrative and this story in our heads, when actually, I guess I'm speaking from my point of view, no one's actually thinking about it. No one gives a shit what you are or aren't doing, or how well you did it, or how well you didn't do it. But we've got this narrative, haven't we, that we have to be seen to be doing all these things. And like, exactly like that duck analogy that you just used, you know, just like kind of, oh, everything's fine, but underneath you're like, you know, it's really, really quite poignant, actually, that statement, that definition.
And it's also the word self-destructive as well, like, because I'll admit that I know I've gone through this, and I've been this person. I know that feels like, hey, I've been through this, and it's self-destructive in the sense of how crippling it can become. And then what it could lead to as well is that you don't know then what other behaviors it could then drive, whether that could be drinking or like doing escapism kind of situations. And like, you just start to know that if you're in this kind of cycle, or if you don't recognize it as part of you, that it can, if you don't go, I am a perfectionist, which I'm recovering one, as I said, but that if you don't know that, you'll carry on driving this way, in this self-destructive way, without having any kind of controls or things like that, which will lead to the self-destructive, and it just fuels the primary thought.
It's like being in a pressure cooker, isn't it? And it's like you keep taking more and more on, because I can do this, everything's fine, I've got time to do this. And you just keep putting more and more and more into the pot before eventually you explode. And you either handle that explosion, or like you said, it can just start to create a different pathway for you to go down, because actually you can't handle it at all. So it's finding that balance, isn't it? That's why I think to myself, you know, like, when people talk about the olden days, was life really easier because we had less to think about, less to worry about? Is this something that modern society has catapulted onto the plates of, you know, our generation and you know, the ones below? I guess it's a really interesting point, because I feel that for me, that pressure sometimes in situations that, as I said earlier, no one's having that expectation of me, but for some reason I've got that expectation of myself, and if I don't deliver, then I feel that I failed. And I think that is a huge thing, because I've learned something in my, you know, 4th decade, that to fail is to succeed. No one who has the greatest successes come from a place of not failing, but yet people perceive that everyone's got their shit together and that everybody's kind of, it just happened for them. But no, they failed time and time and time again. I would like that to be spoken of more in situations like this, because I think that if I'd have known that 20 years ago, and hands up, maybe not the brightest button, but if I'd have known that 20 years ago, maybe I wouldn't have striven, is that a word? Strived to be as this perfect person that I was not able to be, because I had to fail first. And I didn't know that lesson until, like I said, this decade that I'm in now.
And that's the thing, a lot of like even companies now is like they want to fail fast so they can just go, right, we've got to go pick up our direction this way. And actually, because as growing up, you're like, oh no, this is the level you need to be at, and it's okay if you fail. Like, it's no, hey, you've got to pass, you've got to do this, you've got to kind of do all these kind of things, and they've set the bar. And I know that's different parts of society, you kind of need that in something, especially for school.
Yeah.
But it's also,
it's not a weakness.
No.
And I think that's the thing. People think, or I will speak for myself because I cannot speak for others, but I think that I saw it as a weakness if I put my hands up and said, I can't do it, I don't understand, please can you repeat the question? I wanted to, do you understand? Yeah, I got it. And I walk away, and already I've already put I've already got myself in one particular situation, because if I'm not clear on what's actually happening, so I'm already now stressing, and now I'm creating these other negative emotions in me. Whereas if I'd have just gone, you know what, I'm really sorry, I didn't understand it, get the clarity, and then you can go on your pathway from there. Yeah. So yeah. You know, it's not a weakness.
No.
Oh, I've left you with thought.
Yeah, no, you left me with. I'm just wondering, do they? I don't know. Obviously, how they would educate people in schools now. Like, do they talk about that in more of a deeper level? Like that, it's not a.
Do you remember?
Go on.
What was that subject at school that we? Ours was called. It was like a group. It was an actual lesson where you had like the ability to learn life skills, and I don't know whether that exists anymore, but I had that at secondary school, and I don't know whether it's something that maybe comes through education in middle or high. But you know what, Dade, I think that would be such a welcoming source of information and reality to children who are so impressionable to understand these things as they embark upon their adult life. I think that would be key. I really don't know if schools teach it, but they should.
I don't think we had it in our school. I can't remember anything called life skills. I would have been
there was a different name for it, but I can't quite. But it was about it was non-academic, should we say? Okay. It was more social than academic.
Okay. How to survive.
But still,
how to survive.
Obviously, I learned a lot in that class, because clearly I haven't said all the things I just shared with you. They obviously really resonated in the moment.
Yeah. Obviously, you were distracted at the time by boys, no doubt.
What are you saying about me, Dave?
All right, let's go on to another. All right.
Okay.
Oof. Perfectionism is a 20-ton shield that we lug around thinking it will protect us. In fact, it's the thing that's really preventing us from being seen or taking flight.
Yeah.
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 When you read it like that, it does feel heavy. Like when you're carrying this kind of way of this, as she goes, this primary thought, if it just feels heavy. Just just categorizing it as a 20-ton shield, it does feel that way.
Because we all wake up, don't we? And we have a bad day. And when we're having a bad day and we have to then go and get dressed and then put that big heavy shield back on us, we're already feeling like rubbish. And now we've got to pretend to the world almost that we've got all of our shit together when we don't. Yeah. So that really is like an armor, isn't it? But not in a good way.
No, but that's the thing, is that when Brené Brown talks about it, she talks about it as an armor that you put around yourself to kind of protect yourself. And it's like you should have that still, but it shouldn't feel like you're just kind of hiding behind it.
And actually, I think people start to see through that a little bit now. People like integrity, they like honesty. People like to almost know that it's okay to have a weakness. Like, I think, in fact, there was a moment with you when I first met you, and from the outside looking in, before I knew you like I know you now, I used to think, God, this guy's got all of his shit together. He's got everything going for him. He knows, I know, but it's a perception, right? And it was mine of yours. But then there was a time when you came to me privately and you were like, talking about something to do with your career, or you had, a nervousness about something you were doing. And I was like, wow, how empowering, because here's this guy that I've got this perception of that's got all of his shit together, but he's just stood in front of me and shown a weakness or shown a vulnerability. And actually that really empowered me to think, well, if Dade can be like that, I can be like that. So I think actually my meeting with you, I was going through this kind of motion of perfectionism. And actually what happened in turn is just illustrating that, without you even realizing what you were doing, left a really big mark on me. And I've never forgotten it. And it just came to me right now. And I'm glad that I was able to share that with you, because I hadn't until
Thank
now.
you for sharing that. I'm glad I look like I'm coming across with my shit together.
You do, babe. You got it all going on.
But no, something that was also when I know when I need to talk about things, because it could be coming from a place of shame, and we're mostly doing another podcast on shame and what that looks like. But I know that when sometimes these things, you just need to talk about them. You need to let them out, and you need to kind of like give them air, because if you keep them inside, it does feel like you're carrying them like a 20-ton shield, and it's just self-destructive. It really is.
It is 100%. 100%.
All right. I think we're going to go to one more. All right.
Okay.
So I think when perfectionism is driving us, shame is riding shotgun, and fear is the annoying backstreet driver.
Ooh.
I had to do the little car kind of thing just to kind of bring back my theater days.
I love that.
My acting skills, that's how far they went. Well done.
I don't know how you didn't get an Oscar for that one, I've got to say.
Right. But look, like if I'm trying this on, as I like to kind of do, but perfectionism is like driving you. It does drive you. It drives you to, I've got to carry on doing better. I've got to kind of like do this thing. Oh my God, that's never good enough. Oh my God, that's got to be, I've got to kind of get it to that level. It's got to be at that expectation. And sometimes, whilst there could be external things where you're trying to just make sure everything looks perfect, it's also to yourself. You're trying to go, I've got to make sure I'm doing, and you put yourself under so much pressure.
Absolutely. So much pressure. That's the thing right there, Dade. Absolute pressure. I think that's really poignant, because you don't, but then I guess if you've got expectations of yourself and you are really motivated and really driven, then these kind of knocks in the road can actually be like destructive and quite kind of like they can slow you down a little bit. So sometimes it's a case of it's fine tuning that balance, isn't it? It's okay to strive to do your best, but don't think that being perfect is the way to get there, because no one's perfect. If we were all perfect, then we'd live in a perfect world and everything would be in harmony, but we're not in harmony. We're in the absolute opposite of that. So I think that, being your true self, being driven, knowing that you're going to hit bumps along the way, but that's all part of the learning curve. And those negatives, those shames and fears, vulnerability, I see as a positive. I think that you have to just knock them back a little bit and just say, you know what, you're not going to interfere with me on this. I am a human. We all make mistakes. And it's so empowering when you actually start speaking it, because then it becomes so matter of fact. And in fact, I've started saying this to my children. I've got one who's very much like me. And when it doesn't go right, there's meltdowns. And it's like, listen, you've got to fail to succeed. And that's our new little mantra that we've got in our household right now.
That's beautiful to hear. It's so beautiful. And I think you just open it up and like just kind of think around things you can take away from this podcast, if you want to take away anything or just join the conversation, is just to talk about it more. Just like, okay, it's a trait, it's a personality trait. That doesn't mean it's a bad one. Like, you got to kind of just go, if I feel like I've got it, great. How do I work with it? Like,
absolutely.
Strive for your best and things like that. Maybe I do need to pull out this little perfectionist kind of thing a little here. But no, you need to know when to, how it's starting to take control over you and drive you and fuel you. that's where having the conversation kind of thing about it will hopefully then kind of slow it down, and you start to go, actually, hang on, let me just see if am I being a perfectionist right now? And it's though, I think that's the thing I learned to do, is just ask myself the question, are you being a perfectionist right now?
Yeah. Am I seeing warning lights going off right now? Am I making poor choices because I'm struggling under the pressure that I'm putting myself under? My boss isn't putting me under this pressure, so it's coming from me. So Jude, check in with yourself. Free yourself of that.
And I always hate it when it just comes back to, it's about, like, it's you. You're the one who's doing it.
Kind of annoying.
It's annoying. Well,
oh, Jade, I have really, really, really enjoyed this one. Thank you so much. This has been a really, really good one.
Yeah, no, I've enjoyed it as well. I like the reading of the quotes as well. It kind of gave us an anchor point.
Absolutely.
Oof.
Oof. Yeah, quite.
Well, viewers, thank you. I hope you've had a great time viewing this today. We'll be back very soon with another random chat with Dade and Jude. I'm Dade.
And I'm Jude.
We'll take care, and we'll see you soon.